I never thought the place I poured my heart into for 14 years would toss me aside like yesterday's news. But here we are. My name's Jessica Langdon. I'm 41 years old, and up until a few months ago, I was the senior veterinarian at Oakwood Animal Clinic, a small, tight-knit practice in Lexington, Kentucky. It wasn't just a job to me. It was my second home, my family, my life. I'd walked countless owners through puppy vaccinations, late-night emergencies, and heartbreaking goodbyes. I'd skipped holidays, canceled vacations, stayed late without complaint, because Oakwood wasn't just where I worked, it was where I belonged. When Dr. Harrington, our beloved founder, announced he was retiring and selling the clinic, we were nervous but hopeful. He promised us that Brightpaw Veterinary Partners, the corporate giant buying us out, valued our community-first philosophy. They understand what we've built here, he said over a bittersweet farewell dinner. I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to believe him. Because Oakwood wasn't brick and mortar. It was relationships, trust, history. It was us. 3 weeks after the sale finalized, reality punched me in the gut. I got called into a transition meeting with Brian Hayes, the new regional manager, a man who looked like he belonged more on a yacht in Miami than inside a vet clinic. He barely glanced up from his tablet as he explained that, to align with market standards, my salary would be reduced by 40%. I sat there, my ears ringing, trying to process how 14 years of blood, sweat, and weekends meant nothing more than a budget line to them. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, Brian called me back into his glass-walled office. No small talk this time. His voice was clipped, rehearsed, corporate. Jessica, after reviewing our staffing needs post-acquisition, we've determined that your position has been eliminated due to restructuring. Effective immediately. No warning, no discussion, no chance to defend the years I'd poured into building this place. I remember gripping the arms of the chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept my voice even. I refused to give them. The satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, something cracked. Not just from the shock of losing my livelihood, but from the betrayal. They weren't just firing me. They were erasing me from the very clinic I helped become what it was. I packed my things that afternoon under the heavy stares of co-workers too scared to speak. Valerie, our receptionist of 12 years, hugged me silently. Thomas, the new vet, looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. I didn't blame them. Fear hung over that building like a thundercloud. Brightpaw wasn't here to preserve anything. They were here to bleed it dry. As I stepped outside, box in arms, the spring air felt too sharp, too cruel. I looked back once at the Oakwood sign, above the door. 14 years of loyalty, compassion, sacrifice, all wiped away in a 10-minute meeting. No handshake, no thank you. Just an exit, swift and cold. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. First, I was simply hollow. But as I drove home, past the familiar streets, past the parks where I had helped organize pet adoptions and free vaccination drives, a new feeling began to settle in. They may have pushed me out, but they had no idea what they had just unleashed. The first few days after walking out of Oakwood felt like free-falling through empty space. I woke up every morning instinctively reaching for my scrubs, only to remember there was no clinic to go to anymore. My phone was strangely silent, and in that quiet, doubt crept in. Had I thrown everything away? Had I made a mistake trusting loyalty would ever mean anything in business? Then, slowly, the cracks of that self-doubt started to fill in. Not with bitterness, but with something stronger. It began with the little things. A text from Mrs. Patterson. We heard about what happened. Wherever you go, we'll follow. A handwritten card slipped into my mailbox from Valerie. You built Oakwood. Don't ever forget that. A voicemail from Mr. Donahue, the elderly man whose Labrador I had cared for since it was a squirming ball of fur. Jessica, you're the only vet we trust with Duke. Please tell us where you end up. Each message was a spark against the darkness. Every single note, every whispered word of support from former coworkers, every client who reached out. They all pieced together a simple, blinding truth I had been too hurt to see. I was Oakwood. Not. The logo slapped across the door. Not the new protocols pushed down from a corporate tower miles away. Not the sterile restructuring plans crafted by men who'd never held a dying pet's paw or cried alongside grieving owners. Me? I was the one who showed up early and stayed late. I was the one who held terrified kittens close to my chest until they purred with safety. I was the one who cried in my car after putting down a beloved family dog, so the family wouldn't see. They could fire me from a payroll system. They could delete my name from an appointment schedule. But they could never erase the relationships. The trust, the heart that I had built, patient by patient, family by family. That realization was like inhaling after being underwater for too long. I didn't need Oakwood's walls to matter. I didn't need Brightpaw's approval to be enough. The real Oakwood, the spirit, the care, the soul, it lived in the people who still believed in me, even when the building no longer did. Sitting. At my kitchen table one rainy afternoon, sifting through a small stack of sympathy cards from clients who had somehow found out I was gone, I made a decision. A decision as clear and sharp as lightning splitting the stormy sky outside. They might have forced me out, but they hadn't broken me. If they could discard everything I had built so casually, then I would build something new. Something they couldn't touch. Something rooted not in corporate greed, but in compassion, trust, and real care. That night, for the first time since the day I was fired, I slept soundly. Because deep in my bones, I knew my story wasn't over. It was just about to begin. I didn't announce anything. No angry social media posts. No dramatic farewell letters. I moved in silence. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew real. Power didn't come from noise. It came from building something too strong for them to tear down. The first step was location. I spent my weekends driving around town, pretending to run errands while actually scouting storefronts. It had to be somewhere close enough for my former clients to reach easily, but far enough that Brightpaw's legal threats would sound hollow. I found it one Sunday afternoon, an old pediatric clinic, tucked just off Riverbank Drive. The building needed work, sure, but the bones were good. Bright windows, plenty of parking, enough space to start small but grow. Next came the money. I sat at my kitchen table late into the night, spreadsheet after spreadsheet glowing on my laptop. Equipment, permits, insurance, salaries, it all added up faster than I liked. But after 14 years of living frugally and saving whatever I could, I realized I could do this, barely. And if I needed more, the local bank, where the manager had been bringing his golden retriever to me for checkups for a decade, seemed more than willing to help. Supplies were the easy part. I had built relationships with vendors over the years, and when word quietly spread that I might be starting something new, more than one rep reached out discreetly. Whatever you need, Jess, we'll make it work. Staff? That was trickier. I didn't want to pull anyone away from Oakwood openly. That wasn't who I was. But life has a way of nudging the right people toward you when you're walking the right path. Maggie, our head tech, cornered me. One afternoon at a coffee shop, eyes shining with stubborn loyalty. If you're doing something, anything, she said, I'm in. I can't work under them anymore. Valerie, our front desk queen, sent me a text 2 days later. If you need a receptionist who actually knows the clients and their pets, I'm ready. Thomas, one of our newer vets, hesitated longer. He had a young family, bills. But eventually, over beers at a dim bar, he looked at me and said simply, My patients trust me because of you. I'm not sticking around to push overpriced Wellness plans no one needs. Piece by piece it came together. Each signature on a vendor contract, each late-night design session for the clinic layout, each quiet conversation with a former client who just happened to mention they were looking for a new vet. It all fueled the fire inside me. I wasn't building Riverbank Animal Hospital out of spite. I was building it because they had forgotten something essential. Animals, and the people who love them, deserve more than assembly line medicine and profit margins. And no matter how long it took, I was determined to give it to them. Silently, steadily, unstoppably. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Barely 2 weeks after my quiet departure, whispers floated back to me through the grapevine. Clients confused and frustrated. Staff overworked and demoralized. Appointment books looking suspiciously light even during peak hours. Oakwood Animal Clinic, or whatever corporate Frankenstein Brightpaw had turned it into, was bleeding out, one loyal customer at a time. I kept my head down, focused on Riverbank. Every day brought new faces, old friends carrying crates with nervous cats or walking in with leashes in hand, their dogs wagging like they knew they were finally safe again. My heart expanded with every patient we treated, but I wasn't naive. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came crawling. Thought door. Email landed one Monday morning. Subject line, opportunity to reconnect. Sender, Brian Hayes. I almost laughed out loud. Inside was the usual corporate fluff, how they had reevaluated internal structures, how they deeply valued the contributions of foundational team members, how they were committed to restoring the core values that made Oakwood special. Blah, blah, blah. Then came the real bait, a full reinstatement offer. A salary 20% higher than my old one. A promise of clinical autonomy with no sales targets attached. A fat signing bonus if I agreed to return within 30 days. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the words blurring together. Just months ago, I had been disposable, a line item to slash. Now, with their empire crumbling around them, they suddenly remembered my worth? I could have written a scathing reply. I could have pointed out every hypocrisy, every insult, every sleepless night they caused. But I didn't. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't angry anymore. I had moved on. I clicked reply, kept it simple, kept it clean. Thank you for your offer. I appreciate the consideration. However, I must decline. Nothing personal, just business. I hit send, closed the laptop, and exhaled. There was no satisfaction in their downfall, no gloating, just a quiet, steady pride that I had chosen to bet on myself when no one else did. Riverbank wasn't just surviving. We were thriving. We were becoming everything Oakwood had promised to be before they sold their soul to a corporation. And as the autumn breeze carried the scent of change through the open windows of my new clinic, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't revenge. This was rebirth. Opening day at Riverbank Animal Hospital felt like stepping into a dream I hadn't dared to fully imagine. I arrived 2 hours early, nerves jangling, half expecting the place to be empty. Just me, Maggie, Thomas, and a few curious passers-by. But when I pulled into the parking lot, there was already a line forming along the sidewalk. People clutching pet carriers, tugging on leashes, waving when they spotted me through the glass door. By 8:30 a.m., we were overwhelmed, in the best way possible. Families I had known for years showed up with plates of homemade cookies. Toddlers clutched crayon drawings of their cats and dogs. One elderly couple brought a bouquet of daisies for luck. Mrs. Whitaker, who had once cried in my office when her beloved beagle passed away, squeezed my hand and whispered, "We knew you'd find your way back to us." Within 2 weeks, our appointment books were booked solid, wait lists growing longer by the day. Every morning, I'd unlock the door to find new faces smiling back at me, and old ones greeting me like a prodigal daughter. We weren't just a clinic. We were a community, stitched together by years of trust that no amount of corporate branding could ever replicate. I had expected a slow build, months of scraping by, but reality outpaced every projection. Riverbank reclaimed over 70% of my former patients by the end of the first month. The rest trickled in soon after, often bringing friends and family along. Word spread quickly. There was a place in town where pets weren't numbers on a spreadsheet, where care meant more than revenue targets. I watched it unfold with a kind of stunned gratitude. This wasn't about sticking it to anyone anymore. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was about honoring the bond that had carried me through 14 years of good days and bad. It was about giving people, and their animals, a place that saw them as family, not customers. And as I stood behind the front counter one evening, watching Valerie laugh with a client while Thomas knelt to scratch behind a golden retriever's ears, I realized something simple but profound. I hadn't just rebuilt my career. I had built a home. It didn't take long for the ripple effects to reach me. Just a few weeks after our grand opening, whispers began trickling in through clients and former colleagues alike. Oakwood Animal Clinic, once a beloved fixture in our little Kentucky town, was practically a ghost town. Valerie, who still kept in touch with a few former co-workers, told me how the waiting room now sat eerily empty. During peak hours, appointments that used to book out weeks in advance were now wide open. Loyal families who had trusted Oakwood for generations were quietly pulling their records, choosing instead to drive across town to Riverbank. It wasn't hard to see why. Oakwood, the warmth had been replaced by quotas, upsells, and faces that rotated so fast no one remembered your pet's name. Meanwhile, at Riverbank, we remembered. We sent sympathy cards after hard losses. We celebrated puppy birthdays with goofy little hats. We cared. And it wasn't something you could fake or slap a corporate logo on. The community saw the difference. And they voted with their feet. Brightpaw tried to claw back, slashing prices, offering free consultations. But it was too little, too late. Their reputation had cratered, and no special promotion could rebuild the trust they'd shattered the moment they treated loyal employees like disposable expenses. Every now and then, I'd hear Brian Hayes' name pop up, usually in the form of a bitter joke among clients or an offhand comment from suppliers. Apparently, regional headquarters wasn't thrilled with his performance. Rumor had it he was being shuffled to another division, a quiet demotion dressed up as a strategic reassignment. I didn't waste much time thinking about it, because every morning, when I unlocked the doors to Riverbank and saw a line of wagging tails and smiling faces, I was reminded that the real victory wasn't about watching Oakwood collapse. It was about standing my ground when it would have been easier to back down. It was about building something better, not out of spite, but out of pride. I hadn't needed to destroy Oakwood to win. All I had to do was be true to the kind of care and the kind of courage that built everything worth saving in the first place. And that, not revenge, was the sweetest victory of all. There came a moment, about 3 months after Riverbank. Animal Hospital had opened its doors. When I realized something profound, I no longer cared about Oakwood. Not in the bitter, gnawing way I thought I would. Their fall wasn't my victory. My existence was. One crisp Friday morning, as sunlight poured into our little clinic and the waiting room buzzed with the easy hum of conversation and laughter, I paused at the front desk, just watching. Valerie was checking in a family with a new rescue puppy. Thomas was chatting with a teenage boy about his cat's diet. Maggie was wrangling a beagle with the patience of a saint. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't desperation. It was life. It was healing. It was ours. This, not lawsuits, not angry resignation letters, not corporate collapse, was what real winning looked like. I didn't need to shout about my success. I didn't need to plaster it on billboards or send snide emails to Brian Hayes. Every time a former Oakwood client stepped through our door with a soft smile and said, "We're so glad we found you." It was enough. Every appointment booked solid. Every heartfelt thank you note. Every pet that got to live a little longer, run a little stronger, love a little deeper because of the work we were doing here. That was my answer to everything they had tried to strip from me. The best part? They knew. I never had to lift a finger. The silence from Oakwood, the desperate promotions, the ghost town hallways. They said it louder than I ever could. I built something real. Something they couldn't buy, steal, or replicate no matter how much money they threw at it. And no amount of corporate spin could cover the truth everyone already understood. People follow heart, not logos. Standing there that morning, breathing, in the smell of coffee and puppy breath and fresh beginnings, I finally let go of any lingering bitterness. They had tried to reduce me to a number on a spreadsheet. Instead, I became a name whispered in gratitude, trusted in emergencies, remembered in family stories. Success didn't scream. It didn't have to. It simply stood tall and made the world lift its head to notice. And that, more than any revenge plan could ever achieve, was the legacy worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story and found a little bit of yourself in it, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear about your own journeys, your quiet victories, your moments of standing tall when it mattered most. Let's keep inspiring each other.